Well, goodness, thanks for the great turnout. That's really nice on this wintry Corvallis day. You're going to see a lot of pictures of flowers through the seasons. Thank you, Janet, for inviting me to speak and for the introduction. And I also have to really thank Ruby Moon for suggesting this topic. It wasn't something I had really thought about, and I thought, well, that'll be a nice, interesting spin on my regular native plant talks. So before I really go into the seasons, I just want to I have one text slide. This was the only one that's not pictures. And I just want to point out, because I know a lot of you are really interested in pollination, that one of the main reasons to plant native plants in your garden is because of pollinators. And the top part of this slide is information that Dr. Andy Moldenke gave me a number of years ago. He's an entomologist at Oregon State. And I think it's a bit of hyperbole to say no bees, no plants, but you get his drift. They are really important. And he said that there were approximately 510 species of bees in our broad area here, and that 300 of those are wiped out. And also an additional 150 of them are in very small habitats of small number. So I just found that so striking that we have lost almost 90% of our bee species, and that's pretty appalling. So planting native plants is a small measure that we can take in our city garden plots or whatever that does help the native pollinators. The bottom part of the slide is showing a graphic from a study that was done through Oregon State Extension on native plants for gardeners. So they selected plants that are easy to grow in regular gardens, and they planted them out in research fields and actually sampled them for time periods to see how many bees were on the plants, and they came up with this list of 10 best native plants for gardeners. The website that's down there is not on my list, although Christina said the Benton Soil District link is on that handout. But if you write that down or remember 9363, an excellent download you can do that has informational pages about the 10 plants, and super useful. And it's free. I'm just going to really quickly run through what this graphic means, because it's a little confusing to look at it. But there's two rings on it, and the outer one is talking about abundance. So when they sampled how many bees were on that plant on average compared to other plants. So the bigger the circle, the more bees there were for that species. The inner circle is about bee diversity. So that's how many species of bees with their relative abundance. So there's kind of two different metrics they're looking at, their abundance and diversity. And all 10 of these are really important. So here's winter. When Ruby suggested this, I went, great, I have all these slides, spring flowers, summer flowers, and some of them I show them through the seasons, and this will be a piece of cake for me to put together. And then about 3 weeks ago, I went, you need to put them together. And I looked through my photos and went, what do I have for winter? Well, this isn't really helpful in the gardening sense, but this is my husband, Dan, in our garden, and we are co-gardeners. Most years in the Willamette Valley are not like this. And so in order to get inspired, realizing I really didn't have photos about winter gardening, I just went out in our yard and 2-3 weeks ago took pictures of native plants as they are in January in our yard. And then I expanded that to our neighbors' yards and even a few on campus. But it was a great experience for me to realize there's a lot happening with native plants in the winter, and we just don't really open our eyes to it. We're not looking at it, we're not taking pictures that much. So I ended up doing about half this talk on winter because it was so much fun, and it's originating very locally with our garden. There's so many native plants, I had to pare it down somehow. I still have way too many slides, so I'm going to try and go quickly through a lot of these. But I didn't make a handout about seasonality because it turns out that every other season is really difficult to define. In our area where we have altitudinal differences, you're on a north slope or a south slope, you're in the shade, you're in the sun, it's really hard to say this plant only blooms in summer, only blooms in fall, only blooms in spring. So it's kind of a gradient, and I just, made artificial calls as I felt like it for spring, summer, and fall. But winter, if I could see them, I did them. So here we go. I'm going to start with trees, work down through shrubs, and down to perennials. Madrone is our main fabulous winter tree. Its bark is incredible. It is not a particularly good garden plant unless you have the right habitat for it. It does grow, it can be 100 feet tall, and it can be hard to establish. So if you have the right spot for it, amazing tree. It's just great. It has evergreen leaves, so it doesn't have just bark interest in the winter. It has leaves. In the spring, it has glorious clusters of white flowers that are great for pollinators. And then in the fall, it has all these berries, piles of berries that wildlife can utilize. But the main thing to me is this winter rain on madrone bark is stunning. And this picture was, I just got permission to use this from a Canadian friend yesterday. I love your pictures. A more accessible plant is the vine maple. And this not very good picture I took a couple weeks ago in our yard. This is a named selection. I think it's Pacific Rim or something that was selected for its bark color. So in the winter you have that. I found a photo from J. Frank Schmidt that better shows the spring leaves and the bark color. There are so many varieties of vine maple out there with different leaf shapes and colors and stature and bark color. There's just a versatile plant, and you can find these selections. All of them will have these cute little flowers in the spring, and in the fall they have the Samara seed heads, which often have this attractive red color. And then sometimes in the fall you get beautiful fall color, and some trees don't. When I moved to Oregon many decades ago, I was saddened by the fall color here, coming from Wisconsin and the beautiful deciduous forest there. It was a little drab here. Until I went up in the Cascades on those black lava fields and saw the vine maple with those vibrant red colors, and went, okay, this is fall color. Another small tree that's native to Oregon is the Garya elliptica. Not commonly used in gardens, but it's a great plant. Elliptica has these curly edges to the leaves, and it has separate male and female plants. So most people plant the male plants because it can have these catkins that are up to a foot long, really striking. And it starts blooming in December. So December, January, this is our first flower that we get on a native plant. It does produce seed that wildlife could use. I have never seen it, and I think because I mostly see it in yards, people are planting the males, and so we don't get any seeds there. And there's a second species we have, Garya fremontii, which doesn't have that curly edge to the leaf. Still beautiful, beautiful plant, and its native range is more in the Cascades, whereas the first fremontii is, the elliptica is a coastal plant. There's another small shrub that's not well utilized. I took this picture on campus a couple weeks ago. It's a form of tan oak. And tan oak, of course, is a really important forest tree to native peoples in southern Oregon, northern California, and many, many uses for that plant. And unfortunately, it's being decimated by sun oak death. But it produces these acorns that are very important food source for wildlife and for those peoples. Takes a lot of work to use them. I think most people don't use them today. But a really attractive shrub that could be used more, only gets a few feet tall. I also took this picture on campus a couple of weeks ago. Everybody knows salal, and it seems kind of ho-hum, but when you look at it in the winter, it has lovely bark color, lovely fresh-looking leaves, and it's tough as can be, and you can grow it easily. It does have those sweet little flowers that can attract pollinators, and it has berries that people and wildlife can use. So it's a good all-around plant. This one is even more special, however. There's a lot of different Arctostophilus species in Oregon, which is, the common name is manzanita, or that. This is a picture I took in our yard, and you can see in January it's already starting to have flower buds. Has lovely leaves and beautiful bark color. And this is a named variety. And densiflora is not terribly native to Oregon. It's more Northern California, but it does come into Oregon. But probably now, I didn't look, within the short time period, its flowers are going to open all the way. And this species, canescens, is much more common in Oregon. It is also a good garden plant. And then Arctostophilus columbiana is a beautiful shrub also. There's a plant you all know, heavily used in landscaping, the red twig dogwood, which is also the yellow twig dogwood, same species, produces nice white flowers and berries that are used by wildlife. Tall Oregon grape, greatly used in landscaping because it's so versatile. This is a picture in our yard. You can see it's already budding up, and the leaves are glossy and shiny, nice looking plant in the winter. It will open up to have those bright, bright yellow flowers and then the berries that people can use in jellies and wildlife eats. Another species of berberis, and this is next to our driveway, has great fall color. Really, the leaves really redden up, the creeping Oregon grape. It's a very short one, only gets about a foot tall. And it, like the other berberis species, has yellow flowers and blue berries. And it forms a dense enough mat that really we don't get weeds coming up through it, which is always a good feature. Another berberis species we have is the mountain Oregon grape. It also has the winter presence of the evergreen leaves, beautiful yellow flowers, and lovely berries that are used by wildlife. So, in looking at my winter pictures, I'm going, these are things that are heavily used in Oregon in landscaping for good reason. They have a great winter presence. The bearberry or kinnikinnick, this is in our yard too, and you can again see the nice glossy little leaves and the reddish twigs. It looks great in the winter. And then it'll have the whitish flowers and berries later in the year. This plant, however, is not used in landscaping. I put it in because I'm emotionally attached to it. Sorry. This particular plant was given to us by Diana Brin, if any of you longtime master gardeners knew her. And we found a place for it in our yard that is doing really well. It has gorgeous, gorgeous flowers. The name Kalmiopsis means like Kalmia, which is the shrub from the East Coast mostly, I think, which is bigger but has these beautiful little flowers. And I have another emotional attachment to it because this population of this is very common at the site where my husband did his master's work. And on these big rock walls, this plant is flowering all over. And he was the one who actually suggested the name fragrance when this population was decided was a separate species from the one in the Siskiyous. So it does have fragrant flowers compared to the other species. And it's really, this plant in our yard is only about this big, and it must be 10 years old. This, on the other hand, is a pretty popular garden plant. This is actually two species of penstemon growing on a garden wall. This is the winter look. Again, pretty resistant to weed coming up through it. Great on walls. It does well on the ground as long as it has some drainage. And this is it in spring where it's even better. You can see on the left it's actually Penstemon barrettii, and then the more purple one is Penstemon cardwellii, which is an easier species to find. We sell a lot of it at the Master Gardener's sale in May. But it's a gorgeous plant. It's really, really a great plant. Okay, so that's all my shrubby stuff for winter. This is a perennial, the Siskiyou Lewisia, which is easy to buy now. It used to be hard, but has these winter rosettes of leaves. And then in the spring, it's really glorious. It has flowers from white through pink to orange. They can be striped or plain or whatever. It's easy to buy, a lovely selection of them, and they're easy to grow as long as they have good drainage. In looking at this picture, which I'm not sure what year I took that. I should say, by the way, if these pictures don't have some photographer written on them, either Dan or I took the pictures, and we can no longer remember who took which pictures. So looking at this picture, you can see the iris there that we had newly planted with just a few flowers. And so that brought me to what that plant looks like 2 weeks ago, which is not terribly attractive, but it does have evergreen leaves, and it made me think, if we would trim that back, it would look a lot better in the winter. But now, several years later, you can see how big that plant has grown, and it's really a gorgeous specimen. Iris tenax is very plastic. The flowers can be white through deep purple, and they can have markings on them or be plain. In different habitats, they can be really short, or here they're pretty tall. So it's a great species, and I think they're used in hybridizing a lot. So a lot of the Pacific Coast hybrids maybe have some of this iris in them. Great garden plant. One of our other native irises that has evergreen leaves is Iris deglaussiana, and it's a bigger plant, broader leaves. It's there in the winter. Its flowers are nice, not quite as spectacular as the Iris tenax, but still a very nice garden plant. And we found that in our yard, they seem to hybridize. Iris tenax and Iris deglaussiana. We have these plants come in that have some characters of one and some characters of the other. So we're not really sure what they are, but we're pretty sure they're hybrids. So that's kind of fun. We're doing our own plant breeding by mistake. So I'm going to move on to some ground covers. Sedums are great ground covers. They grow mostly in sun, but they tolerate shade. I'm sure all of you know this lighter colored one is the selection from Cape Blanco. It's sold as Cape Blanco. I think the bottom picture is also a Cape Blanco that we're growing in more sun than the other one, but I'm not positive. And then the picture on your right is a variety from Southern Oregon, Northern California that has these great red stolons. And I don't know if you can find that in the nursery trade. It used to be called variety Purdy Eye. I'm not sure if that still stands. But we had a friend give us this plant, and it grows very well in our climate. All of the staphylopholiums have these bright yellow flowers in the spring. And other than that, year-round, they look pretty similar. Good ground cover. Another sedum that we like to grow is Sedum divergens. It has much smaller leaves, little round things. And if any of you have hiked the Iron Mountain Cone Peak Trail, that's the sedum that grows up there that turns bright red in the sun. It's really lovely, and then it has those super starry bright yellow, and then red and yellow are beautiful together. But you can grow it right here in the valley, no problem. Here's a plant that likes shade a bit more. This little leaf montia. This is a picture from a friend's yard a couple weeks ago, and it forms a little ground cover, probably not enough to suppress weeds, but it's there in the winter. And then in the spring it has these charming pink flowers. And we like to grow it on a low wall or a pot or something, and it'll kind of droop over and drop little babies here and there and spread itself. My friend thinks it's too vigorous growing, but it's like this, not like that. Right? This flashlight came on for some unknown reason. Is a population of that montia that a friend from the Gold Beach area gave us. We think it might be tetraploid because it's way more robust than the pink flowering one. And this one has white flowers that are taller and bigger. The whole thing is very robust. And it's not native right here, but it was a native to the southern coast. And it also can be aggressive in its very soft, easy to pull up kind of way, but it does spread relatively quickly. Another shade ground cover are wild ginger, which indeed has a ginger scent, and you crush the leaves or dig the roots, but it is not culinary ginger and could make you sick if you ate very much of it. It grows in moist, rich shade, which happens to be a really excellent slug habitat, so it tends to get, in the winter, kind of lots of holes in the leaves, but it's still there, nice winter cover, and in the spring it has these amazing flowers, which sometimes you have to lean over and pick up a leaf to find. Probably beetle pollinated often because the flowers stay underneath the leaves. And there's also a white flower form that I got through the Master Gardener sale, so come to the sale. And then we also grow 2 other species of native wild ginger in our yard, a little harder to find, and also very slug-eaten in the winter, but they just have gorgeous, gorgeous leaves the rest of the year. And interesting flowers, not quite as beautiful as the western one, but still lovely. So, another shade plant, our wood sorrel, and we have 2 varieties of that. The top one is the regular green one, and the bottom one is often called redwood sorrel, I think. Has darker leaves with red undersides, and the one flowers white and the other flowers pink. They're both good garden plants that spread rapidly, and I took this picture actually in the Cascades, but this is why you don't actually plant them in a good garden bed. You will live to regret it. But we grow it in kind of marginalized side habitats, and it's quite well behaved and lovely. But you do have to be kind of careful of that. Another, not exactly ground cover, but perennial in the saxifrage family. I took these 2 pictures the same day. I don't know why. Sometimes they're green and sometimes they're red. Probably the little difference in sun that got them, but they're there all winter. And then they have these really charming flowers. Its species name is grandiflora. They're about a 1/4 inch wide. So I think that it's compared to some other saxifrage that it's grandiflora, but they're very cute. They're really a nice plant. And they're supposed to be really good for hummingbirds. So that's nice. When I was doing my walk around, I ran across this little ranunculus occidentalis in the yard, and I thought, well, I didn't know those were evergreen, and I didn't know they showed in the winter. But there it was in my own yard. They have beautiful yellow flowers, and I think they're underutilized because they're super easy to grow, and they spread not aggressively. Although in nature you will see hillsides covered with them, but in our gardens we've never had them spread aggressively. It's a picture from our old garden where you can see it just really brightens up this very shady part of our yard. Okay, so that was kind of ground covers, and now some ferns. Obviously a fabulous landscape plant, everybody knows, and if you let it get huge, it gets huge. The licorice fern, not as much utilized, but they actually do taste of licorice, and they only get a couple feet tall. You mostly see them on tree branches or moist areas of bark. We grow it on the ground, or just put bark down, and it grows just fine there. And it's also called winter fern because if you don't water it in the summer, it disappears. And then when the fall rains come, it comes up and has that evergreen look, and it's good. And then my last evergreen fern I'm going to bring up is the deer fern, which is really a lovely kind of specimen plant you can use in your gardens. It has the evergreen leaves, and it has 2 types of fronds, the sterile fronds, which are just coming on here, which have great structure in the garden. They're really sweet. And then these are the fertile fronds, which unfurl. Incercinate vernation is the botanical term, which I love. Really nice garden plant. And my last winter slide, and I'm sorry this took so long, is about annuals. So walking around my yard, I went, look, my rosy quatritis is already up and ready to go. And in not too long, it'll have these great pink flowers, and they're really lovely, and they are ephemeral. So we've planted tomatoes and squash in this same spot. When they're gone, you can put in vegetables if you want. And they spread nicely, but not aggressively. It took us a while actually to get it established, but now it's a really nice population. This is an annual that a couple weeks ago was already making a little ground cover for us. The blue globe gilia. It has these heads of 50-ish flowers, and it is a voracious self-seeder, we could say. If you let it go, you can have a forest like we do, but it's wonderful. You can hear the bees buzzing when you walk by this plant. In our garden, the plants get big. In nature, they're usually pretty small. But we really love having this in a kind of wild area. And you can see this is one of the 10 best bee plants. So I highly recommend it unless you have a nice, neat garden.
Unless you have a what?
Nice. You can see we don't. So, and this is my last annual, the Mattia elegans, the showy tarweed. There's actually some baby poppies in the corner there, but I didn't put them in winter, I put them elsewhere. So Mattia has really showy, elegant flowers, and again, it's a voracious self-seeder if you let it, and it also is one of the top 10 plants. And if you let it go, you're going to have a lot of them. We have grown it in the past as a specimen, one plant, and it does great as that too. So you can select how weedy you want it to be, but it's an excellent pollinator plant. So I'm done with winter, and we're going to go into spring, and I'm going to try to be faster here because I'm going to run out of time quickly here. Our second shrub, the Garya, blooms first, but this one blooms February, and it has those nice, bright green leaves that we see, and then fruit. It's a nectar source that early season for hummingbirds and moths and butterflies and native bees, so really great plant. Not a beautiful garden plant per se, it's not a good specimen plant. Unlike the red fallen currant, which is just a fabulous garden plant, and you can get it in white through almost red, all different shades. And it's a really excellent garden plant that also has berries, and it's also good for hummingbirds and birds and butterflies, etc. A plant I think is a little underutilized is our native deciduous azalea, or rhododendron. This is a picture in our old garden, but what a beautiful plant. When it starts blooming, it rivals any horticultural variety of deciduous azalea, and it's one of those plants we said we have to quit taking pictures of. So, okay, so that was my little shrub tree section, and now on to small things. Spring Queen is one of the first small flowers to bloom in our area. It does have evergreen leaves. We don't have it in our yard right now, that's why it didn't end up in winter for me. But it's quite a charming little thing. Even though those darn taxonomists changed its name, I still love it. Particularly because the new species name, Regina nivalis, means Queen of the Snow. That's nice. Another annual, it's not annual, it grows from little corms, but it comes up pretty quickly, makes a nice little ground cover, and it disappears relatively quickly. The spring beauty. This great plant for streamside. Benton County is the northernmost point of its native range, and it sends up these saxifrage family flowers first, and then the leaves start coming on. I have a little oak fern in the background there. The leaves eventually can end up quite giant and very spectacular in the garden, and the flowers are quite beautiful and obviously good for pollinators early on as well. A few deciduous ferns that will come up in the spring. the maidenhair fern, which might be my favorite fern if I had to have one. Just lovely plant. And then the lady fern, which, at least in our yard, comes up whether you want it or not. But I am fond of this plant because my mother taught me when I was young that how to identify a lady fern, and I always think of her when I see it because she points out that there's these brown hairs on the stem, and that the pinnae are widest in the middle. So it's a lady fern because it has hairy legs and is widest in the middle. So, at least that was the way to identify it in Wisconsin. I don't know if that conflicts with any of our species here, but I always look for those characters. Okay, now our just fabulous spring flowers we all know and love. The fawn lily, just stunning, and it will self-seed in your yard if you put it somewhere happy. And also our red or pink flowering species, more a coastal species, but it does great here in the valley. And it self-seeds even more than the organum does. And it's beautiful even from the back. It's just a really great garden plant. We grow several more species of erythronium. The yellow one is the glacier lily, Erythronium grandiflorum. The top one is actually a European species they call dogtooth violet. And the bottom one is Erythronium hendersonii, which grows in southern Oregon. And we lusted after that plant for many years. A neighbor finally gave us some, so we're happy people again. But I had taken this picture, or I'll stand it, at Table Rock in southern Oregon, where there's just understory, beautiful cover of this plant. It's really pretty. Of course, the best beloved Western Trillium, which as the flowers age, turn light pink to deep pink. Beautiful, beautiful plant. And our other common Trillium, the sessile Trillium, which self-seeds in our yard quite readily. And you can see the little single leaves. They're probably 2-year-old seedlings. They're the little round ones. And then up there you can see leaves with 3. And those are probably 3, 4, or 5-year-old seedlings. And so it's 6 or 7 years before you get a flower, but they do multiply in your yard. We also have the Trillium ravali, which is a more southern coastal species, I think. And charming little thing, flowers about the size of a quarter, and it's about 1.5 inches tall or something. And it comes in nature and in horticulture. You can get it from white through fairly red mottled. The prize of our garden is this Trillium angustum petalum, the giant purple Trillium, which Dan was given by a neighbor from a farmyard at Monmouth or McMinnville, I forget. So we don't really know its origin, but we finally got DNA done work on it, and it is angustum petalum, and it is a just glorious. It's giant. Wow. You see this picture? It's really giant, and it just has these long petals that in the sunlight are so gorgeous. It's, as we say, it's the only plant in our yard we don't share. We also have a Trillium problem. These are 4 other species that we have in our yard. And these are all species that were in my mom's garden in Wisconsin. And Trillium luteum, Trillium recurvatum, which is the erect one, and Trillium erectum, which is the recurved one. Go figure. It's about the sepals. And then Trillium grandiflorum, which looks somewhat like our Trillium ovatum, but in the Midwest grow in these amazing cloves. Just beautiful, beautiful in the forests. So we have some other Trillium species too, but we're not going to talk about that. Here's, of course, best beloved plant, and it has so many common names. I don't know what you all call it, but kitten's ears, cat's ears, seagull lily, mariposa lily, hairy star tulip. I think it has so many names because it is so charming that people in different areas have given it different names, and it just has these to die for flowers. They're so sweet. I believe the Benton Soil District sells the bulb to them in their sale. they are very hard to establish. We've had populations survive for a while and then we lose them. But it's worth the effort. They're just the sweetest little plants. On the other hand, the shooting stars self-seed readily. And this Hendersonii is more from southern area of Oregon, and there's other species in Oregon. But this one in our yard, we got thousands of plants from the 5 we started with. It's a really lovely plant. And in nature, it often grows next to this Pacific hound's tongue, which is a borage family thing. You can see the little forget-me-not flowers, and then it makes these big sticky seeds that when you walk through them, you will come home with those seeds. Another shade perennial we all know, the false Solomon seal, very tough plant, does well. And it has the white flowers and the red berries for wildlife. And then Actia rubra, the red baneberry, has these clusters of little firework flowers, and then red berries or white berries. There's 2 different populations of that as well. This delphinium, when I first saw it in Oregon, I thought it was a garden escapee, but no, it's a nice native plant. Beautiful, beautiful flowers, likes wet feet. It's poisonous, so farmers don't appreciate it too much, but its flowers are used by hummingbirds, songbirds, and butterflies. And yeah, it's beautiful. And I threw in this picture because the name Trolliifolium means that it has leaves like the genus Trollius. And this is a picture of Trollius, and you can see the leaves. They are very similar to our delphinium. And Dan and I got to see this on wildfire. See, you did it. Wildflower hikes in Switzerland in the wild, so that was very special to see that. Our other native delphinium here is Pavinaceum, which our local chapter of the Native Plant Society has adopted as its logo, because this is the center of its population. This is the only place in the world where this plant grows. And there's a pretty big population at Finley, actually, that you can see. But not easy to get in a nursery. I think probably Willamette Gardens, Esther's nursery, is the only place that you can get it. Maybe Dancing Oaks has it, I'm not sure. And then another little ground covery annual, baby blue eyes, which comes in a variety of colors and stripes and stuff. And one of our master gardeners planted a mix of annuals from territorial seed called Monomore, I think. And I was at her house and I went, oh my gosh, isn't that gorgeous? So I don't know what happened to it the next year. I wanted to ask her that. And one more annual here, the Clarkia alminia, Farewell to Spring. Lovely flowers, obviously a great self-seeder, and one of the top 10 pollinator plants. So, Farewell to Spring brings us to summer. This is a photo that Lisa Borgensen, an amazing master gardener, sent me a few years ago from a trip she did to Eastern Oregon. And if that doesn't say summer, you know, it's summer. Really beautiful. I'm going to start again with small trees. We've got our red and blue elderberries. The red elderberry starts blooming in the spring, the blue elderberries a little bit later with their red and blue berries. And butterflies use them and other pollinators. And then the red elderberry you need to cook or it can make you sick, but people can consume it. Mock orange, fabulous garden plant, fragrant and easy to bloom, easy to care for. Ninebark, another good garden plant, and there's so many horticultural varieties now, but even the native plant is lovely and has these interesting capsule seeds in the fall. And we're done with shrubs. Here's the best ground cover in the world, except we have a hard time growing it. Linnea borealis is the plant that Linnaeus himself named for himself, the only one. It's the sweetest little plant. When we did have luck growing it at our old house, it was by burying rotten wood and planting it on top. So we need to work harder at trying that now. The Jacob's Ladder, a great, easy to grow shade plant, blooms in the summer. Bleeding Heart blooms almost all the time, I think. And it also, if you put it in a really happy place, is kind of too aggressive. You want to give it something it's not quite so happy about, because it can survive really harsh conditions once it's established. I took this picture on a clear cut, and it was still surviving. It's a plant I've only seen in nature once, near Oregon caves, but so crazy that that's a native plant. I had seen it in bulb catalogs long before I ever saw it in nature, and I thought, what, that's native? But pretty easy to buy from bulb catalogs, and it's a really cool plant. But here's the one that speaks summer to me, the Oregon Sunshine, and it also is easy to grow in the valley as long as you got some drainage. Doesn't want to be in a winter wet spot. Has bright yellow flowers, blooms for a long time, and it's one of the top 10 pollinators. And withstands a lot of drought and stuff. It's a tough plant, good garden plant. Here's the showy fleabane, and it can get pretty tall in a garden, and it's a great plant for butterflies. And it also will make seed heads for birds to eat later. The western blue flax, really beautiful plant. And it also can vary in color and stripedness and stuff, but quite easy to grow. And here's what it used to be mimulus, but now has that unspellable, unpronounceable name that I'm not going to say, the yellow monkey flower. This is, again, a plant you don't plant in your regular garden bed or you will regret it. But if you plant it away from your other plants in a nice spot, it will behave itself, and it has those fun little monkey face flowers. Another monkey flower is the red monkey flower. And I've had people tell me that it's a danger for overproducing in your yard. We've never had that happen. It kind of pops up here and there, self-seeds in our yard, but never aggressively. But it's something you'd want to keep an eye on if you plant it. Obviously, hummingbirds love this plant. So here's the wild hollyhock. It grows in part shade, and it's a pretty well-behaved garden plant. It has pretty evergreen leaves, really, and lovely pink flowers. And it's also a top pollinator. And we have in the valley this other native species of Sidelsea, which is not quite as good a garden plant because it gets quite tall and rangy, but if you can plant it with tall things to help hold it up, it's also a beautiful plant and good for pollinators. Then here's our California poppy, we all know, and obviously, again, a great self-seeder. It varies quite a bit in color, and you can get them quite pale. I mean, I think you can buy seed mixes with pink even. I've never seen that in nature, but you do see the other yellow or splotchy in nature.
And red.
And once again, it's an excellent pollinator plant. So, I just this morning threw this slide in, thanks to my husband finding these pictures for me, because I'm in summer and I don't have any sunflower plants in here. So this is the narrow-leaf mule's ear. We grow this in our garden, but we couldn't find our own pictures for some reason. And it's a good, tough plant, blooms reliably, and doesn't spread in our yard. Mm-hmm. So, okay, made it through summer. We're going to go into autumn. So, autumn, what do we think of? Dying leaves and mushrooms, at least. And my granddaughters. Okay, so there are flowers that we have that bloom in the fall. What used to be Joshneria, California fuchsia, blooms through the summer, way into fall. Great plant. You have two subspecies or varieties here. Cadum and latifolium, these beautiful fuchsia-like flowers, and then a second species, Septentrionale, And then, this is a picture I took in my neighborhood at some point, and I can't remember where, because I want to go talk to those people and find out what variety that was. I'll keep working on that one. Another good fall blooming one, the big pictures from my sister's yard that she planted plants that I had started for the Master Gardener sale in her main garden, and that was kind of a mistake. She spent a lot of time weeding them out, but boy, were they pretty. And this also is a top pollinator plant. There's common yarrow, which people use sometimes as a lawn substitute if you mow it and keep it short enough. If you don't, you know, the flowers go all through summer, late into fall, and then they're dry in place. And it's very attractive to pollinators and butterflies. It's one of our top 10. Then Pearly Everlasting is supposed to be particularly good for painted lady butterflies, which is kind of interesting. And I'm a little confused because one of my lists of top 10 pollinators they handed out at the sale last year had this plant on it. But now on their website, they have the Sidelcia instead. So I don't have their little graphic for this plant, but I'm sure it's a very important pollinator. And it has these long, long-lasting flowers you can use as fresh or dried arrangements. And then, of course, fall is all about asters. And native asters are really a crucial resource for pollinators when there's not a whole lot else going on, including for butterflies. Hall's aster is a pretty well-behaved aster. Douglas's aster, not so much. Do not plant this in a garden bed like I did. It's you can see some pollinators on there. It really is good for pollinators, but it will spread rhizomes through your yard, and you will have them forever. So plant them in a. If you plant it by itself in a dry field, as they did for this study, very well behaved plant. So keep that in mind. So it is the top. If you look at those filled in, it was the top on abundance, top on diversity plant. And in the winter, it has billions of these fluffy seed heads in our yard, which are really great for wildlife and birds to eat throughout the winter. We're now back in winter, and I quit. Thank you.